Welcome back. Today we're going to revisit a fly we tied 7 years ago. This is called the Goober Midge. This has morphed into a bunch of different flies. But it started out as a midge and a midge cluster. And it was crazy. I didn't understand this. I was sitting up I don't know, half mile above here. And I was just sitting in the water and watching midges hatch. And they're hatching all around me. And what I noticed was the males, just like males of all species, were a little more aggressive during the mating ritual. And what you would see is you'd see the female poke her head up. It'd just leave a little dent in the thing, in the surface, the meniscus, and it would pump a little bubble like this, and these males would run and grab her. They literally pull her right out of the water, and they just start tumbling, right? And they're all trying to grab this one female. And the reason you'll see that the wing, the way this is built, is as they grab and they start this midge cluster, it's the male, trying to mate the female, and they're just rolling around, and their wings are super reflective. And I never noticed this. I saw, the Griffith's gnat, which I never understood it, because it's like they're very tubular. Their bodies a midge is very tubular, and you don't really see much from the under looking up at them. And here's this thing with all the hackle around it, and it didn't make any sense to me at all until I saw this actual behavior when they were rolling around and all that reflective value of the sun hitting their wings. And then I realized that when you look at a Griffith's gnat, all that hackle represents all that movement in some respect. It's just like it's moving around. And so anyway, this fly has become just a really staple for us. It's about the only dry midge we fish. It's a pretty straightforward fly, and it's more, like I said, it's morphed into caddis, and it's morphed into yellow sallies, and we've used it for a lot of stuff. But this is the basic. It's one of the first videos we ever did, and Johnny said we should redo it. And of course, we all have to do what Johnny says, so we are redoing it. So, very basic. We're going to have I'm going to use a 100 or 101, doesn't really matter what hook you tie it with, and that's just for example, just a standard dry fly hook. Thread-wise, I'm going to tie with 12-aught Semper Fly, whatever. It's just a 6-aught. A lot of times I tie this with just regular nylon. Body-wise, on this one I'm going to do black superfine. You can do it in black. You can do it. Johnny likes the gray one. You can do whatever color. They're pretty nondescript on their body. So once they're adult, they're pretty dark. They're either a gray or black phase for the most part. The underwing is going to be lateral scale or crinkle mirror flash. This stuff, same thing, except this stuff comes in a lot of colors. Kind of fun. I'm just going to use the regular pearl. What's next? The wing, I'm going to have some short fine deer hair, X-Caddis or whatever short fine hair you've got. If you got compared hair, that's good too. And then last but not least, we're going to have hackle. We're going to have this, sorry about that. We're going to have, this is grizzly. I do this one size. Jeremy asked me earlier, because I always cut the bottom, but I always leave those before I get there, because when I get into this, I'll tell you about that as I go, but I use the hackles a little bit longer than like what the hackle gauge would tell you, because I need it to bounce around. I need this fly to move, and so I don't trim these off until I get there. And if I'm watching, if I see a lot of movement on the bugs, I leave that hackle long, because they're hitting that action, they're hitting that movement, and it just keeps them on top. It doesn't look right. It'll look like it's doing a wheelie. They don't care. They eat the hell out of it like that. So, at any rate, we're going to go now. And this fly is tied a little different. It's tied like a couple of my other caddis, which is, like I said, they're morphs of this. But this is tied in thirds. And so we're going to tie the abdomen. So I'm going to start back here, and I'm going to wax that thread a little bit. It's kind of slippery. I'm going to start at the 1/3 point at the back. These are just rough. So come in here and get about 1/3, I'm using superfine black dubbing. And again, you've seen my videos in the past. When you dub, you want just enough so when you let it go, it floats, not drops. If it drops, you have too much. Separate these fibers a lot so they cut. You want them nice and tight. You want them to roll on there nice and tight. And we're only doing a third, so you're not going to need much right here. And spinning clockwise with your dubbing, slide that up. Now, about to the third, I want a little bit thicker right there. Come on, stop that. Fighting me. Don't fight in the beginning. Okay. I forgot to say what size I do these. Oh, that looks awful. Now I see it. We're going to do that over. Maybe we won't. Well, we're going to live with that. I should have put my glasses on ahead of time. All right, so now we're going to take 2 strands of this. Excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. No, I'm not. I haven't tied one of these for a while. I like to leave this long. Wet these so that, just put it in your mouth. It's, non-toxic. And how do I know? Maybe it is. But I'm going to tie this in. Put just one turn right on top, let it slide. Just keep it on. I keep it just a little bit this side of the center. Go 2 or 3 turns forward, pull it back, and that one's just a little bit off to the side. You can see they're not quite sitting right on top of each other. Just leave that long for right now. Keep that. When you wet these, you can set these aside, and you can work. I cut them off at the right at the base here. I can work with this and get a half a dozen flies if you can not knock it off your table. So I leave that long because then I'm going to set the wing, and then I'm going to get an idea. Right before I set the wing, I'm going to cut that so I don't have it too short. Same thing now, we're just going to dub this, and we're going to go the front third. We're trying to keep that, so when you look at it, when you look underneath, just make sure your body's looking pretty uniform. Didn't like the way that was sitting. Okay, now we're at the front third, and look underneath, you should be pretty tubular. Take this short, fine deer hair, and you want a pretty good chunk of this. Where'd that little sample go? And so you want it to, because this tail, this wing, it actually kind of rides on it, right? And this fly is really hard to sink. And so you want that thing to sit up on the tips of that hair. I would rather see you have too much wing on this than too little. There's actually very little wing showing when you do these things. There's not a lot of wing showing, but when they start rolling around and moving, and there's multiple wings, then you're going to see it's a great stabilizer, and it won't hurt a thing if it's a little bushy. If it's too small, it won't stabilize the wing or the body well. So on this one, we're going to, I want this to be just slightly longer than the bend of the hook, right? And see where that's going to be.
Rotate your hand.
Oops. Jeremy's yelling at me. Rotate my hand so I can see. I want it to be just past here. So you got a pretty good idea where your wing's going to be. You can cut these off now. Don't cut those short. No, you want a good full, you want that reflective value under there. So I'm going to come in here and just gauge it about the length. See, you can see how long that flash is. And I'm going to put that in so they're about, now this is going to flare up a little bit. So don't make it exactly the length. Give yourself a little bit extra. And we're going to cut this off nice and square. Take your bobbin. By the way, I didn't mention this. I tie with 2 bobbins. I tie with a Renzetti. People ask me that question a lot. I use a ruby tip Renzetti for almost everything I tie except big streamers, and I use a right bobbin. But spin that to the right, and what that does for you, it allows that'll lay back. See how that thread lays back automatically? I'm not fighting it. And so, tighten that up there, hey. Come in and just, I screwed around there a little bit too long. So I'm going to catch, see how I've got just the tips of this hair, the butts I mean. I'm going to come in and get as little as I can get right there, holding it firmly in my left hand, my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm going to pull right straight down, make that little tiny elk hair caddis head, and then I'm going to, nice and even, I'm going to wrap right through that head, just like that. So I'm nice, and I'm going to get all that build up, and there's that beautiful little wing. Double check, I got a little bit off to the side there, not a big deal. Cut two of them off. Now we're going to take the hackle. This fly is a great fly. If you like to buy the 100 packs, this is a good one. But remember, if you're buying 100 packs and you're tying an 18, get a size 16 hackle. Don't get us too small. So, and I like necks. This is a good spot for necks. And I want to show you something here. I did on this. This is so simple. All necks come in these bags, right? If you like to keep them in the bag, that's great. But they all come square. If you cut this thing off, you can actually get them in and out of the bags. I don't know why they make you fight these bags, but they do. And so you're going to come in and find yourself, just grab one and look. If you don't have a hackle gauge on there, just before you pull them off, grab one and just look and see if you got a nice, there, that's a good long hackle. Whatever you do, don't make it too short on these, because the legs are like, they're running all over the place, right? And so you want a lot of distortion. You don't want these perfect little legs off to the side. So I like to trim this off just a little bit right there, so I got a little bit of tie-in room. I'm going to put right beside, I'm going to come in from right to left, butt that, right underneath that wing. Do a figure eight, don't want to catch that. Do a figure eight around it, and then just two in front, and just squeeze that down nice and tight. It's off to the side a little bit. Not sure if I hooked that or not. I'm gonna double check that. I didn't. That was in fine. Because when you cut those hackles off like that, if you leave the barbular stems there or ends there, you'll grab a little bit better yet than having a slippery stem. Figure eight, 1, 2 in front, tighten it down. Don't be afraid to go backwards, man. It's just save you in the long run. So now we're gonna have a nice big thorax here. I'm gonna put one behind it. I'm gonna kind of go back and forth. Just want to fill that in. I want to look underneath, and I don't want to see those butts of the hair. That's just personal. I like it to be finished all the way through. It won't mean diddly squat to the fish, but you'll know that you did it right. So come forward. You leave yourself room for your head. I like to have 3 turns of hackle on this. The first one goes right over the wing. There's 1, 2, 3. We're done. Whoops. Don't let go of your hackle. Couple turns on there. You can break that off. Clean it up. Whip this off. 3-turn head. Leaving those forward. When I tied that hackle, and I didn't even mention it, I forgot to mention it, I pulled it off to the side, and that gives you, if you'll notice, there's 2 antennas out the front of it, and I completely forgot to mention it. When I tie my hackle in, you leave it here and you grab it, so don't let your hackle slip. You leave your hackle on this side, give it nice and tight, and you draw it back, and it automatically gives you a pair of antennae out the front of your fly. It's a cool little kicker. Usually about the time you tie your hackle, you're tipping on, you catch them anyway. It's not a big deal, but it's just kind of a cool little thing. If you look on the cover of my cripples and spinners, you'll see both those flies have antenna out the front. And Most people think that you tie those in. That's just how you do it. You leave your hackle on this side, tighten it, pull it, there's a pair of antennae. So look underneath it now. It's kind of high. Now, again, usually when I fish this, I come in, and I'm going to do it just so you see what I'm talking about. I trim this, but I do that I always have scissors with me on the river. I'm always messing with my flies. And so when I get to this point, I want this fly, I'm going to turn it upside down, you can see. So I'm looking right now, I'm looking underneath the fly. I'm sure you can see, I'm going to tilt it just a little bit up so you can see. I think you'll be able to see better when I tilt it. Can you see better like that, Jeremy?
Yep.
So you can see that reflection underneath there. That's what you're trying to find. The wing's nice and set. You don't want anything off you don't want to make sure there's nothing underneath here. It's all black. And so then that reflective lateral scale underneath there. And then I want that hackle long. It's a size bigger. And I'm going to set this down so you can see it. I'm not sure. I'll throw a piece of paper down here so you can see what I'm talking about. I want it to be up and bouncy like this. See how that's sitting above, not flat down? See how that's bouncing? Now, when it gets wet, it's going to sit down a little bit more like this. But I like that being like doing a wheelie when it starts, because if those bugs are running and you got nothing in your quiver except a dead drift, you're going to miss a lot of fish. If you can get used to twitching these things, just pow, move them, pow, here's a little bit of movement, better yet. But it works better when they're up on the tips like that, when you first start doing it. But when I fish it, if they're not doing that, and they're not always doing that, a lot of times you're going to come up on a midge pod and they're just going to be sipping these things. They're not looking for, you can see if they're running. And so if they're not up and sipping, I just want this clipped nice and flat right underneath. So now you can see it's down, right? So if that was in the water, the hook would be through and he's flat. Can you see that?
Not quite.
Right there.
Yep, there you go.
So I mean, if this was the water, it would be down, like the hook would be through, it would be riding like that, not up like that if it was with the hackle. So it's just this is a super durable fly. I mean, it's virtually impossible to wreck this thing. And it floats forever because all the hair and the hackle's too big and all that stuff. But this fly can morph into, this is a great caddis pattern. You do exactly the same way all the way through. You take it just a little bit bigger and you want to do it in a yellow Sally, the smaller stuff. You could keep going double. You can double wing these things and get up and do, a pretty big fly. And so, I mean, you could go up to a golden if you wanted to. But the key in this is that reflective value for the midge. It's an absolute must on these things, as far as I'm concerned. I haven't fished one without it ever. And it's really about the only midge I fish. And like I said, it's morphed into my caddis and a lot of other stuff. So it's a real versatile fly. It'll cover a lot of stuff. I hope you liked it, and I hope it helps you out.